Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Confessions. Grab your coffee, take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear isn't a breakup story. It's a quiet implosion, one that didn't make a sound, until it was too late. The garage light was still flickering when I pressed the code to lock it for the last time. My shoes were wet, not from tears or some metaphorical storm, but from the lawn sprinklers that always came on too early, like everything in my life lately. I didn't slam the door. I didn't take one last look. I didn't even take my toothbrush. Because when she said the words, "I think we're done," she said them like she was canceling a subscription. Mildly annoyed it didn't cancel itself. She didn't expect a response. She expected a discussion. Careful one. One where I'd ask if we could fix it. One where I'd suggest therapy. One where I'd break. But I didn't. I just nodded, reached for my jacket, and left the lasagna I'd made still warming in the oven. I think that's what broke her more than anything else, the silence. No note, no text, no accusation, just absence. But here's where it gets strange. 2 days later, she called my sister. Not to ask if I was okay, but to ask where I went. And my sister, bless her chaos-loving heart, just laughed and said, "He told me he left the storm behind. Maybe now she can enjoy the silence she always wanted." I know this all sounds cryptic, but I'll explain everything. What she did, why I left, and what she found after I was gone. Because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about a woman who thought silence meant surrender, and a man who learned that disappearing can be louder than any goodbye. She didn't call me, not once, at least not in the first 48 hours. I expected that. Laurel always needed time to craft her reactions. Measured, clean, like curated statements to the press. But on day 3, something changed. My phone stayed on airplane mode, buried in a shoebox beside the motel bed. I didn't want to see her name flash across the screen. Honestly, I didn't want to see anything. I spent those first 2 nights staring at motel popcorn ceilings, wondering how many other husbands had escaped to this exact room, just to breathe without permission. And then I got the message. Not from Laurel, but from Tessa, her best friend. Or former best friend, maybe. It simply said, "You should know she's spiraling." I'm not defending her, but she didn't think you'd actually walk away. That line hit me harder than I expected. She didn't think I'd walk away, because in her head, I was spineless, predictable, a man who folds, not vanishes, a man who makes tea when yelled at, a man who apologizes when he's not even sure what he did wrong. She thought I'd wait like I always did, until she decided I was useful again. But I didn't leave without planting something behind. I wasn't cruel, just intentional. I deleted my location history from our shared apps, but I left my laptop on the dining table. Open. Logged in. Bookmarked on one very specific folder labeled Untitled. She was never supposed to see it. Or maybe she was. It was a slow collection of quiet betrayals. Things I'd noticed, screens I'd saved, receipts she'd carelessly thrown into the trash. A folder of what I chose not to confront, of what I endured in silence. Her messages with someone named D. Vague travel invoices with overlapping dates. Voice memos she didn't think I could access. I didn't leave it to punish her. I left it to free myself from the gaslighting. The silence wasn't revenge. It was truth. And now that she'd read it, because I knew she had, the calls began. Blocked numbers, unread voicemails, and one final text from her mother of all people. "You broke her." No, ma'am. She broke herself. And I just stepped out of the way. 3 days after I vanished, she finally called me. I didn't answer, not out of spite, but because I knew the first thing out of her mouth would be her pain, not mine. Laurel was always good at crying when she felt exposed. Not when she was guilty. Not when she was lying. Only when the mirror refused to flatter her anymore. I listened to the voicemail while sitting on a bus headed nowhere. The kind of empty interstate that stretches so long it feels like you're riding away from gravity itself. Her voice was trembling, not from sadness, but disbelief. "Curtis, I didn't mean for it to come out like that. I didn't think you'd actually walk out without saying anything. I thought we could talk. Please don't do this. Please just call me. She sounded broken, but not by regret, by control slipping out of her hands. When someone hurts you over and over, you stop bleeding. You calcify. I wasn't numb when I left. I wasn't some brave man reclaiming his dignity. I was just tired of begging someone to see me, like really see me, while she rehearsed her next lie in the mirror. I stayed in a roadside in that night. The front desk clerk asked if I needed wake-up service. I almost laughed. I hadn't truly woken up in years. The next morning, her sister messaged me on Facebook. We hadn't talked in ages. She always liked me, though, called me the quiet soldier. Her message simply read, "She's unraveling. I think she finally realized you were the only real thing in her life." I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the old draft folder on my phone, the one where I'd been writing letters I never intended to send. Some were angry, some were desperate, but one stood out that morning. I'd written it 8 months ago, right after I'd found her second hidden phone. It read, "I'm not leaving because you cheated. I'm leaving because you buried the version of me that believed in us, and danced on his grave like nothing happened." I copied it, sent it to her, then turned my phone off again. No explanation, no threats, just that one sentence. I imagined her reading it, standing in our kitchen, probably barefoot, probably still trying to figure out if I'd really gone. I imagined her scrolling through old photos, reading between the pixels, looking for the moment she stopped loving me and the moment I stopped waiting for her to notice. She wanted me to fight for her. But some wars aren't worth winning, especially when you realize the other side already signed a truce with someone else. And I wasn't about to beg for a place in a story where I was only ever a footnote. By the time day 5 rolled around, I had driven through 3 states and spoken to exactly 0 people. I didn't have a plan, just distance, gas station coffee, empty hotel rooms, and silence so thick it echoed. It's strange how loud the world gets once you finally step out of a relationship that made you feel invisible. I started noticing things. The way sunlight hit the side of the dashboard. The way my stomach didn't knot every time my phone buzzed. The way I could breathe again without feeling like I needed her permission. But of course, she wasn't done. Laurel never accepted things she didn't understand, and she didn't understand me anymore. I was supposed to cry. I was supposed to show up on the porch, flowers in hand, asking for a second chance like some broken romantic. That was the version of me she knew. The safe Curtis. The one who once apologized for catching her in a lie because I should have trusted her more. This time, I gave her nothing but stillness. She sent another message. This one was colder, sharper, the kind of text people send when their embarrassment starts turning into anger. "Curtis, this disappearing act is childish. I just wanted to talk like adults. You've always been so dramatic." That one made me smile. Dramatic? The same woman who screamed when a waitress got my order wrong. The same woman who once threw a wine glass because I forgot our anniversary dinner was meant to be at that overpriced Italian place. Not the Thai spot we both actually liked. I didn't reply. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I visited my old art professor in a sleepy town outside Ohio, Mr. Whitaker, the guy who once told me I saw the world like it was already breaking. He barely recognized me at first. Said I looked folded. I laughed. Felt good. He let me crash on his pull-out couch and drink real coffee, not the watery gas station stuff I'd been living on. We didn't talk much, just shared silence that didn't feel awkward. The next morning, he handed me a dusty box. My old sketchbooks. I flipped through them and felt like I was looking at a version of myself I had buried for her comfort. I had stopped creating, stopped imagining, stopped dreaming, because Laurel didn't like things she couldn't control. That afternoon, I took a photo of one of the drawings, a piece I'd titled Reflection, and I sent it to her with no caption. It was a sketch of a woman looking into a cracked mirror, her face distorted by the break. I didn't expect her to get the message, but I knew she'd stare at it for hours, trying to decode what it meant. She always hated not knowing. That was the thing with Laurel. She didn't want honesty. She wanted control. And when I walked away, I shattered the illusion she built. I wasn't her doormat anymore. I was the crack in her perfect little world. And I was just getting started. A week after I left, I watched her go live on social media. No, I didn't go looking for it. Tessa sent me the link. I hesitated before opening it. Not because I missed her, but because I wasn't sure I could stomach watching her perform. Because that's what it always was with Laurel. A performance. Even our wedding video felt more like a highlight reel for her than a memory we built together. I watched in silence as she stared into the camera, eyes puffy, makeup carefully smudged to look raw. She wasn't crying. Not really. Her voice was calm. Too calm. "I know a lot of you have been asking where Curtis is," she began. "Honestly, I wish I knew. He left without a word, and I just hope he's okay. I didn't expect him to vanish like this. We were going through something like all couples do. But this isn't healthy." Healthy. That word made my stomach twist. She made it sound like I was the unstable one. The lost puppy who wandered off in a storm. Not the man who spent 3 years sleeping beside someone who had already emotionally checked out. Someone who made every day feel like I was begging for space in my own home. She talked for 15 minutes, carefully painting herself as the confused wife, blindsided by my reaction. Never once did she mention why I left. Never admitted to anything. But at the end of the video, her voice cracked just slightly when she said, "If you're watching this, Curtis, please come home. We can fix this." I turned it off before she could finish. That night, I sat at a truck stop diner somewhere outside Knoxville, staring into a cup of bitter coffee, thinking about how many times I begged her to notice me, to ask if I was okay. And now that I was gone, suddenly she remembered how to care. But it wasn't care. It was panic. Because I wasn't playing my part anymore. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep drifting. I needed to land somewhere. Not to disappear, but to start over. I called a former colleague, Brandon, who owed me a favor. He worked at a print shop in a sleepy coastal town in Maine. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but when he answered, he didn't even hesitate. "Get here. You can crash at my place. No questions asked." It was a strange feeling. Realizing that someone I hadn't spoken to in 5 years was more concerned about me than the woman who claimed to love me for over a decade. As I packed my things and planned the final leg of my journey, I opened my texts one last time. There were 19 messages from Laurel. 4 voicemails, 1 missed call from her lawyer, and then 1 text that stopped me cold. "If you don't come back, I'll tell them everything. Your silence won't protect you." Protect me from what? That was the moment I realized something deeper was hiding beneath her confusion. Something ugly. And I was about to find out just how far she'd go to keep control. I didn't sleep that night. Her message kept replaying in my head like a riddle wrapped in threat. "If you don't come back, I'll tell them everything." But everything what? That I left? That I finally grew a spine? That I stopped pretending I didn't see the way she flinched when I touched her or how she smiled at her phone like it whispered sweeter things than I ever could? I wanted to ignore it. I told myself it was just desperation, the kind that makes people lash out. But deep down, I knew Laurel didn't bluff. When she felt cornered, she didn't retreat. She burned the room down and made sure you were holding the match. The next morning, I got a call from HR. Not hers, mine. "Hey Curtis, we just had someone contact us regarding an alleged breach of policy involving misuse of equipment. Anonymous tip, but they claimed you'd taken client files without authorization. I told them it didn't sound like you, but we have to follow protocol." I froze. I hadn't even touched my work laptop since leaving. It was still at home, wiped and shut off. There were no files, no secrets. But Laurel knew just enough about my job to fabricate something that sounded almost believable. It wasn't about destroying me. It was about forcing my hand. Make me come back. Make me explain. Make me beg her to retract it. But I didn't. I called my manager directly. Told her the truth. That I had walked out of a very messy marriage. That I was off-grid for a while. And that I hadn't accessed anything work-related since leaving. She was sympathetic, suspicious, and quiet. Said she'd look into it. I knew what that meant. My reputation was now in limbo, floating between truth and whatever poison Laurel was whispering behind closed doors. I sat in my car outside Brandon's print shop and stared at the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. This wasn't about love anymore. It never was. Laurel didn't want me back because she missed me. She wanted me back because she couldn't stand that I had left first, that I had written the ending without her approval. So I made a move she would never expect. I scheduled a meeting with her ex, someone she always swore was toxic, obsessive, manipulative. I found him on LinkedIn. Simple message. You and I were both characters in her story. I think it's time we compare notes. He replied within the hour. I've been waiting years for this. What he told me in that call wasn't just confirming what I already suspected. It shattered the version of Laurel I had clung to for years. The cheating? Yes. The manipulation? Definitely. But it went deeper. The lies she told him were the same ones she told me. Recycled, rehearsed, and devastatingly effective. She didn't love people. She collected them, used them like mirrors until the reflection cracked. And now that I had walked away without shattering, she was coming for me with a hammer. But I wasn't the man she left behind. And I wasn't done disappearing. Not yet. The conversation with her ex, Drew, shook something loose in me. Not just because of what he said, but because of how he said it. He didn't sound angry. He sounded relieved, like someone who'd escaped a maze and was grateful just to warn the next person not to enter. He told me stories that mirrored my own life almost word for word. The same sudden emotional distance. The same accusations flipped backward. The same carefully constructed narrative of you're too much or you're too needy, when really, all you ever did was try to hold her hand while she was already reaching for someone else behind your back. It was eerie how aligned our pain was. But it also proved one thing. None of this was an accident. Laurel didn't just fall out of love. She dismantled people. And I wasn't going to be her final project. The next morning, I received a forwarded email from one of our mutual friends. Apparently, Laurel had written a long, detailed message to several people we both knew, painting herself as the abandoned wife, suggesting I was emotionally unstable, implying I had vanished without a trace after months of erratic behavior. The line that stuck with me the most? I tried so hard to love him, but Curtis was always a little off. She was rewriting the script, erasing her betrayal, making sure the version of me left behind in our social circle was just damaged enough that no one would think to ask about her actions. I didn't respond. Not publicly. I didn't defend myself or send a counter-narrative. Instead, I gathered everything. Every receipt, every text, every voice memo, every time-stamped calendar entry she forgot I had access to, and I sent it in one clean PDF to her lawyer. No context, no threats, just titled it, "In case she wants to keep talking." That same night, Brandon handed me a spare key to a tiny apartment above his shop. Said I could stay as long as I needed. The space was dusty, smelled like ink and cardboard, but it felt more like home than the house I'd shared with Laurel for over a decade. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without a weight on my chest. No accusations, no cold shoulders, no pretending. The next morning I got a call. Not from her. Not from her lawyer. From my old manager. She said the anonymous tip had been investigated and nothing checked out. The metadata on the fake documents traced back to a different IP. Not mine. She didn't say Laurel's name. She didn't have to. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in silence for a long time. This wasn't about escape anymore. It was about survival. And I realized something I never thought I'd admit. I hadn't left because I stopped loving Laurel. I left because I finally started loving myself more. 3 weeks after I left, I stood barefoot on the beach outside the small town I now called home. The sky was pale pink, the air crisp with salt and wind, and for the first time in years, I wasn't checking my phone, waiting for an apology that would never come. I was just breathing, fully. Finally, Laurel didn't reach out again. Not directly. I heard through a mutual friend that she'd gone quiet, stopped posting, stopped answering questions, retreated into herself like a performance that had run out of applause. I don't know if she ever opened the folder I left behind. I don't care. It wasn't for revenge. It was for closure. Mine, not hers. Somewhere between the highway motels, the gas station coffee, and the long hours in that tiny apartment above Brandon's shop, I rediscovered the version of me she tried so hard to erase. I started sketching again. I started writing. I even began helping Brandon redesign marketing prints for local artists. Just something small, something that felt like mine. I wasn't healed. Not completely. Some mornings still come with a strange ache, like a ghost tugging at my sleeve. But it's no longer Laurel's ghost. It's the echo of a man who spent too long asking for permission to matter. And now I give myself that permission. I got a call last week from a woman named Abigail who runs a local gallery. She saw one of my drawings hanging in Brandon's shop and asked if I'd ever consider putting together a small collection. I almost laughed. Me? The background guy? But she was serious. She said, "You draw like someone who's been quiet for too long." She had no idea how right she was. So that's where I leave the story. Not in bitterness, not in tragedy, but in the quiet beginning of something real. I left without saying a word, and somehow, that silence grew into a voice I didn't know I still had. To anyone out there stuck in a love that feels like absence, I promise, there is life after disappearing. And sometimes it's where you finally show up. Thanks for listening. You're watching Reddit Confessions. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear from you. Tell me about a historical event that still fascinates you or shaped how you see the world. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more real stories, raw emotions, and unexpected endings. We all deserve to be seen, even if we have to vanish first.